Long ago, in Neolithic times, there lived a happy family in a cave. There was a man called Tegumai Bopsulai, which basically means man who does not put his foot forward in a hurry, which sounds like a wise man, but then again, maybe not if he spent all his time wandering around with no particular direction. And then there was his wife, Teshumai Tewindrow, which means lady who asks many questions. Not the worst name in the world, but I bet most of them were answered with, I don't know. Then there was their daughter, Taffimai Metallumai, which is Taffy for short, which means small person without manners who ought to be spanked. And this was a bit of a problem because Taffy much preferred going on walks with her father than doing chores at home with her mother. Now one day, Tegumai, that's the dad, remember? Tegumai said to Taffy, "Come with me, daughter. We're going fishing at the Wagai River." Now the Wai River is here, actually, the river way here. When Tegumai and Taffy got down to the riverbank, Tegumai put his spear into the water, intending to catch some fish for dinner. But then, ouch, it broke right in two. Now normally, Tegumai would have been prepared for such an emergency because he always carried a spare spear, but in this case he didn't have one, so they had to return home empty-handed. On the way back up the riverbank, Taffy said to her father, "Why didn't you write for help when your spear broke?" To which Tegumai replied, "We don't do that sort of thing." And Taffy said, "Well, I'll draw a picture for help then." But when she tried to scratch out a picture of a spear on a stone, she realized she couldn't draw very well at all. Then she spotted a bit of birch bark on the ground and used that instead. She scratched out a couple of pictures on it, handed it to her father and said, "Here you go. This should get us some help." Tegumai looked at it and said, "Looks good enough. But who will we send it to?" Well, as luck would have it, along came a perfect candidate. It was a stranger from the Tawara tribe. He stopped and asked, "Can I help you?" To which Taffy replied, "Oh, perfectly. Please deliver this message for me." She pointed to the drawing, thinking the pictures were self-explanatory, although I can't imagine what went through the man's mind when he saw a half-naked prehistoric girl covered in dirt, pointing at a random piece of bark covered in markings. Anyway, he took the bark in his hand and promised to deliver the message. Then he disappeared into the forest. Meanwhile, Taffy's mom, Teshumai, was wondering where the pair had gone and why they were taking so long to come back. Eventually, she decided to go and find out. On the way to the river, she saw the same stranger and asked, "So are you lost?" And the stranger said, "No, I'm on my way to deliver a message." And Teshumai thought, "That sounds important. Let me take a look at the message." The stranger handed over the bark, and Teshumai looked at the pictures and thought, these pictures aren't good." You see, she wasn't very good at understanding pictures, but she did understand violence. The pictures on the bark looked like Tegumai being attacked by enemies with spears. And not only that, but Taffy seemed to be calling for help. So, assuming that her husband and daughter had been captured, she called over the other Neolithic ladies and told them to come and help fight off these imaginary attackers. The ladies ran all the way to the tribe of Tegumai, screaming, "Help! Our husbands and children are being attacked by spear-wielding enemies." Now, the tribe of Tegumai had a lot of men, but also a lot of chiefs, because apparently every man and his dog was a chief in those days. Still, all the chiefs agreed that they needed to protect their people, so they assembled the warriors and shamans and some of the villagers too, and marched off to defend them. Meanwhile, the Neolithic ladies sat on Teshumai's porch with the stranger, whose name we now know was Brown, just in case you hadn't noticed, and made him tell them everything he knew about the tribe of Tegumai. Of course, Brown politely told them that he didn't know anything useful, but the Neolithic ladies weren't having that. They pulled his hair, stuffed it with mud, and sat on him until he eventually caved and told them where to find the tribe of Tegumai. When the tribe of Tegumai heard that their wives and children were in danger, they abandoned whatever they were doing and joined the procession to the river. After all, Fighting off imaginary attackers was only the second best reason to march everyone in your tribe down to the riverbank. The first, of course, is real attackers. Unfortunately for them, though, there were no attackers to be found. All they found was Tegumai and Taffy by the river. In fact, Tegumai was fishing with a brand new spear because a friendly beaver had given it to him after he fixed his old one, and Taffy was busy making daisy chains because she thought they might make a nice surprise for her father. The tribe assumed she'd run away with her boyfriend from the Tewindrow tribe, and they were so angry that they wanted to kill him. Poor Brown tried to explain that this was all a big misunderstanding, but the tribe didn't want to listen. They just kept yelling, "Get her, Brown! Get her!" So Brown did the only thing he could think of to escape. He ran. Now, as he ran, he thought to himself, "These people are insane. If I tell them that I haven't seen a half-naked prehistoric girl covered in dirt offering me a random piece of bark covered in markings, they'll probably kill me. So I better keep running." And that's exactly what he did. He ran as fast as he could until he reached his tribe, the Tewindrow tribe, where he immediately told them that he'd just escaped from the tribe of Tegumai, who were planning to kill him because his name was Brown. Now, being a small tribe, the Tewindrow had no hope of defending themselves against the larger tribe of Tegumai, but luckily they had a secret weapon. See, the Tewindrow tribe consisted entirely of women and children because their men had all died of a mysterious illness a few months earlier. So as soon as the tribe of Tegumai arrived demanding Brown, the Tewindrow unleashed their special weapon, namely all their women and children. And since the tribe of Tegumai had no men with them, they had no choice but to surrender. Then Taffy came up to the head chief of the tribe of Tegumai and said, I think there's been a bit of a mix-up." So she explained how she'd drawn the pictures on the bark, but the head chief just kept interrupting her by saying, "Silence, child. I won't tolerate such disrespect. You will now be punished." Taffy pleaded with the chief, but he wouldn't listen. So she did the only thing she could think of. She began to cry. Then the head chief finally relented and said, all right, I suppose you've cried enough. Now tell me what happened." Taffy then explained about how she drew the pictures, but the head chief kept interrupting her by saying, "Silence, child. I won't tolerate such disrespect. You will now be punished." Then Taffy just started crying again, so the head chief eventually said, all right, I suppose you've cried enough. Now tell me what happened." Taffy then explained how she drew the pictures to ask for a black-handled spear, not for help, and how she meant the beavers, not the enemies. But by then, the rest of her tribe had already lost interest and gone back to fishing. However, they were still cross about the whole incident, especially Teshumai and the Neolithic ladies, who had spent hours getting ready to go and fight those imaginary attackers. The head chief decided that the whole thing was hilarious and announced to the entire tribe, "Taffy has just invented the written word." Everyone stared awkwardly at him for a moment, but then they all burst into laughter. As for Brown, the head chief welcomed him into the tribe and invited him to live with them forever. And apparently he accepted because nobody's ever mentioned him leaving, so I'm assuming he stayed. Now, because this is a story about Taffy, we can't end it without a poem about her. Once upon a time, when England was green and the rivers flowed deep, long before Guildford town, there stood Merrow Down, where the river was wide and the beavers did build their strong dams, where Tegumai lived in a leafy green dell, and Taffy played rings round a wooden pail. With her father, Tegumai, bold hunter and keen, the tribe of Tegumai cut a noble figure.